Welcome back, Bookworms. The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly is a coming-of-age story about a 12-year-old boy called David who just experienced a terrible tragedy. He also really loves books, especially fairy tales, and one day as he tries to cope with his new life after said tragedy, he finds himself in this different, fantastic world that kind of reminds him of a fairy tale world, yet not exactly. He then tries to find his way home, but also tries to find something in this world that he believes that will help him cope with this terrible sadness that he feels. The book takes elements from fairy tales and even in itself is kind of built like a fairy tale. David encounters many challenges and dangers along the way, and he also undergoes a more mental or spiritual journey and matures along the way. Now I want to start by talking about the positive things that I have to say about this book, which also means that I have some negative things to say, obviously. But I do want to point out before I begin that even though the negative things here did bothered me, the ending made things better. I just want to point that out. So let's start with the positive things. First of all, the writing and the language were great. Also, the pace of the book was really good. It was quick. I didn't get bored, even though some characters tell in the middle of the book some stories that only sometimes are related to the plot. I wanted to keep reading. I wanted to know what happens with this situation, with those characters, etc. And also, and this is kind of funny because it's also a negative point, and I will say more about that when I get to the downside of the book. But I'm glad that the author did not forget that these fairy tales, before they became sweet Disney version, were really, really dark. So I'm just glad that the dark side of those fairy tales was very present in this book. Now let's get to the negative things of the book, and I think everything can be condensed to one big issue, which is I couldn't figure out who the book's target audience is. Throughout this book, and even now after I read it and finished it, I could not point out if this book is for young teens or kids, or is it for adults, and this is very important, and I will now tell you why. First of all, the protagonist is 12 years old, and usually the age of the protagonist is a good indicator to whom this book is meant for. Also, a lot of things in this book are overly simplified, which also reinforces the point that this is for a young audience. I mentioned before that the book itself is kind of built like a fairy tale, and something that bothered me is that throughout this book, David just walks along, meets a character, learns a little bit about said character, a little bit about this world, maybe encounter a challenge. If he has a problem, he solves it right there, finish everything, moves on, meets another character, does something with this character, and moves on, character by character, in a very linear, kind of boring way. In each encounter, there's something to be learned, a certain lesson, and I know that because a character said that. Yeah, it's that clear. And sometimes this lesson is actually being told plainly by a character. And another example for this oversimplifying is David's mental journey, his maturity. Characters say that he arrived a frightened child and now he's a man. I didn't see it. I didn't see any actual growth. I also noticed, speaking of learning things, that every time David actually takes initiative and does something himself, he ends up killing someone. This someone is always a bad guy. But still, I would have expected him to learn not to simply kill each and every villain or enemy. Why not try to imprison some of them? Why not try to talk to them? See things from their point of view. Not every single character who does things differently or does bad things is necessarily evil. On the other hand, I can't completely blame him because the villains in this book are completely one-dimensional. It seems like all the bad guys there are just bad for the sake of being bad. They just want everyone to die, they want everyone to suffer, so they kind of randomly choose victims for the heck of it. That was kind of disappointing because there was one bad guy that I would have expected also to learn something, to figure out that maybe doing things in his way, his aggressive way, will not get him anywhere, and I would have expected some sort of a Lion King twist. It happens in many places and stories, but Lion King is just a very famous example where the main villain's minions learned that he was just using them and turn against him. In Lion King, I was obviously talking about the hyenas and Scar, in case that wasn't clear, but obviously this happened in many other stories and movies, and I was expecting something like that here, but that didn't happen, and everyone just ended up killing everyone else. And all of this could have been fine if this was really a book for young teens with oversimplifying things. But on the other hand, there were many things in this book which personally I did not think that were suitable for kids or young teens. Remember I said that this fairy tale world is dark? Well, that was an understatement. Some of the images in this book are gruesome and gory and just plain scary. This book is almost a horror book at some points. Some of the deaths here are being described to the gory little details. Some of the villains have very disgusting ways to torture and kill their victims. Yes, torture. We get to see characters die slowly and painfully. But who knows, maybe today kids can really deal better with these things than what I would have dealt with when I was 12. But if you are thinking of getting this book for a young teen or for a kid, I think you should know that these things are there. But the ending was good and sad and kind of tied everything together. Although we are left with some unanswered questions, I do think most of them are left open on purpose to get us to think or whatever, but some are inconsistencies, but I doubt anyone would actually be bothered by them. So to conclude, that was a difficult one. Look, I do think that although it has this kind of inconsistency, you know, on one hand everything was oversimplified, on the other hand there were really gory, bloody parts there. I did like the concept of the book, and look, I'm glad that I read it as an ebook and didn't buy an actual physical copy. I doubt that I will ever read it again, but I think that maybe for teenagers this book can be really good, you know, not complete adults and not kids, and maybe something in the middle, or maybe even younger teens that are not afraid of gruesome, gory things. And that was my review. Thank you for watching. If you like it, please don't forget to click like and to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye.